Well, it blinked, but I've got a generator, but it blinked off for maybe 10 minutes. I think my generator came on, but then it flipped off here.
Mine was on until this afternoon. Kicked
Oh.
off this afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know here in River Drive, all the way into town.
It was out.
Yeah,
Although traffic moved pretty well
yeah.
through 5 Points because I drove through that about noon today.
Oh, okay. Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
No, not yet. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mhm.
I think he ran to get a printout. Is that what it was?
And this year,
I think we ought to wait for Director Bauer to get the Zoom turned on, don't you?
Yeah. Especially for the public hearing portion.
I think that's a good idea. You know, the nice part about that new clock is that we know what time it is.
Yes.
The bad thing about that new clock is that we also know what time
Time
it is.
yeah.
okay.
So anybody turning around, sometimes I can see the headlights.
Oh, yeah.
Find out.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Where's,
I don't know. Jackson?
yeah,
The traffic lights were gone, so when the traffic lights.
5:30, but I think just hold for a little bit.
Turn.
Major intersection of Telegraph and.
And fire us
there
up.
are three lights coming from the center lane, so nobody knows if all three lanes move together.
How are ya?
Or what, if two cars came and one car
Good.
came later, nobody knows.
Go ahead. I have
Yeah.
to set up Zoom, but don't let that get in your way.
When I was coming back at night, all the lights
By
all
all
the way
means,
from
yes.
Auburn Hills to Livonia, most of them.
Okay, it's 5:30 at this time. I'd like to call meeting to order for the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission for Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Bernie Grant,
Here.
Peter Creel,
Here.
Medina Atchison, Jackson Paul, Jeff Jar, Brian Cullen.
Here. We have before us an agenda for tonight's meeting. Do I have any motion concerning the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
We have a motion support on the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We also have before us the minutes for the regular meeting of July 24th,
Through the chair.
that should be August
Yeah,
14th.
yeah.
minutes for the meeting of August 14th, 2024. Do we have a motion concerning the minutes?
Through the chair. I make a motion, we approve the regular meeting minutes of August 14th, 2024 as was amended.
Support.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have any correspondence or announcements at this time. Then we have our first up for the evening is a public hearing concerning the case 24-207, Costco Beck Road property rezoning. And this is a public hearing where we're going to elicit comments from the public concerning Ryan Hartsuff of MG2 on behalf of owner Costco Wholesale Incorporated has applied for with a request to rezone parcel ID number V-125-83-014-99-0004-704 from M1 Light Industrial District to M2 General Industrial District. The site is 38.80 acres of property on the east side of Beck Road, south of Michigan Ave. This time I'd like to open the public hearing. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and support for the opening of the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is open. Do we have any comments?
Through the chair, if I may, just to give a little bit more of an overview of the request for any who would like to make a comment on this tonight, just to give a spatial orientation to this site. I just want to put up on the screen, and this was in the public notice as well, but just the scope of the proposed rezoning. You look at the subject site that Costco is seeking to rezone. It is the parcel that they own to the west of their current parcel at 5860 Belleville Road. It may be interesting or useful information for folks in the audience who might want to comment on this, or for our planning commissioners to just know that part of the reason for this request is just because of a potential future expansion to the west, which this application is, this view that you see here is preliminary, and this will be a separate request that's presented to the Planning Commission at a later date. The request for tonight's meeting is simply for the rezoning aspect of this request, and our planning consultant during the new business item tonight will go over the findings on the rezoning aspect. The M1 to M2 rezoning would be required to allow any kind of expansion to what Costco does. Their site on Belleville Road is currently zoned M2 General Industrial, and that zoning would have to be in place for any expansion to the west as well. And so that's the purpose of the request tonight. At this point, we would typically invite comments from the public before we get into any comments from staff or from the applicant during our new business section. So with that, I'll step aside and let anybody from the public who would like to make comment, please do so.
Anyone from the public? Please come up to the microphone, introduce yourself and your address as well, please.
Hi, my name is Maureen Little. I'm the daughter of the owner on Beck Road, 6233 Beck Road. And our major concerns are about noise and the lights that would be used in the expansion of the property. It butts up against her property on two sides of it. And so we do have some concerns, and she does want to know what is going to be done. And I think if you can clarify that, it should be okay.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Comments? Questions? Do we have anyone on Zoom, Director Power?
Let's see, we do have one participant on Zoom tonight, but I recognize the name. I believe this person is here to be present for a different case on tonight's agenda. But Mr. McGrainer, if you'd like to speak to this request, please feel free to do so.
Anyone else from the public? Any other comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing.
With support.
Motion to close public hearing with support. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. New business, item number 1. We have case 24-027, Costco Beck Road property rezoning recommendation. Ryan Hartzafan of MJ2 on behalf of owner Costco Wholesale Incorporated has applied with a request to rezone parcel ID number V-125-83-014-99-0004-704 from M1 Light Industrial District to M2 General Industrial District. The site is 38.80 acres of property on the east side of Beck Road, south of Michigan Ave. We have first a presentation by the township staff. Director Power?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point, I will defer to our planning consultant, the senior principal planner from McKenna, Vidya Krishnan.
Director Power, members of the commission. As you summarize, the request before you tonight is from Costco Wholesale to rezone a 38.3-acre parcel located on the west side of Belleville Road along the west property line of the existing Costco distribution center. The request is to rezone it from M2, which is light industrial, to M2, general industrial classification. We review every request for rezoning based upon the standards established in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act and consistent with the standards in our zoning ordinance. A brief summary of the existing conditions. The subject site, as you can see, is currently vacant and undeveloped. It currently is zoned M1. Future land use plan for it is heavy industrial. To the north is an industrial park in Canton Township. It is zoned and master planned as light industrial. To the south is a railroad easement, which currently is zoned M2, general industrial, under a consent judgment, and will remain M2 in the future land use plan too. To the east, of course, is the Costco distribution center. And to the west are existing single-family residential dwellings, which are currently zoned M1 light industrial, and their future designation is heavy industrial. There are specific standards in the zoning ordinance based upon which we review every request for rezoning. I shall summarize those in brief. The first one is whether it is consistent with the goals, policies, and objectives of the master plan. Now, the applicant's proposal to rezone the M2 designation is allow for expansion of the existing distribution center facility to the west. Any addition would require a change in the zoning of the subject site because Costco distribution center, as it stands today, is not a use that would be permitted in a light industrial district. The master plan for this site is heavy industrial, and it is, I quote, intended for industrial uses of a higher intensity for areas that take advantage of railroad and major thoroughfare access and are generally buffered by light industrial uses. So this vacant piece of land has remained part of Costco since a long time. I mean, probably since originally the Costco site was constructed. The change from the existing light industrial to heavy industrial is in line with our current master plan, future land use plan map recommendations. The second criteria is whether it is consistent with the basic intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance. Now, the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance is to impose regulations to allow for a planned use of land. To that end, any development that takes place on this project will be subject to all of the regulations in the zoning ordinance, including access, circulation, lighting, landscaping, green belts at such time when it is developed. The third criteria is whether the capability of the street system is there safely and efficiently accommodate the expected traffic that would be generated by the site. The parcel, as you can see, has got no frontage onto Beck Road. So anything constructed on this site will have to continue using the Belleville Road access to this property. As Director Power previously summarized, Costco does plan to put in a small dry depot addition, which is just a few thousand square feet on the west side of their existing building. However, that project is not part of this request to rezone. So I just wanted to clarify for Ms. Little, as part of this request for rezoning, there will be no development taking place on this property. At a future date, then anything they want to build on this property, they will have to submit for full site plan application, come back before the Planning Commission. At that time, all of the light fixtures that are going to be installed, the circulation, the screening to protect the single-family homes, all of that will be reviewed in detail for compliance with ordinance standards. So at this time, the Planning Commission is not approving any construction on the property. This is merely a change in the designation on the zoning map, a sheet of paper from M1 to M2. Anything they put on the property will have to come back before this Planning Commission. The next is the township's utilities and services sufficient to accommodate the uses? At this time, we are not aware of any constraints. This is a distribution center. As such, the amount of strain put on the existing utilities is not as much as any other kind of manufacturing or similar use. However, at the time of site plan approval, the site will be reviewed for compliance with any requirements by the township engineer and Wayne County if it should be needed for stormwater detention. The next standard is whether there was any error in the zoning ordinance or zoning map that is being corrected through the rezoning, and that is not the case. The zoning map is accurate and the applicant is following the established procedure. The proposed rezoning is not going to result in an exclusionary zoning. Exclusionary zoning basically means not allowing for a zoning designation within your township which would allow for a particular use. You're actively trying to zone out a use. This rezoning is not trying to do that. The proposed rezoning, is it compatible with the site's physical, geological, hydrological, and other environmental factors? Now, the site is mostly, as you can see, vacant grasslands, and there are a few isolated clump of trees. Per Eagle's wetland maps viewer, a predominant portion of the site does not have any wetlands. However, the southwest portion of the site does abut the Apple Run drain, and there are some trees along the drain which are protected as part of the drain itself. At such time when the site is developed, the site will be reviewed for that, and they will need to get any necessary approval from Eagle as necessary. We have provided a summary of all the uses that are permitted in the M2 district, which are permitted and which are permitted as a special land use. So in brief, the M2 is intended to provide location for manufacturing, assembly, fabricating, and large-scale specialized industrial operations. Looking at the scale of the uses that is permitted in M2, the use that is being proposed by Costco as a distribution center, which is basically a larger expansion of a warehouse, is on the lower end of the intensity of uses that could be expected in an M2 district. The requested rezoning is not creating an isolated spot zone. It is consistent with the existing M2 zoning to the east itself. And the rezoning is more appropriate rather than change the existing zoning regulations for M1 to allow for an expansion of a use of this sort. And finally, the rezoning is not being done in order to allow for a specific use. It is being done at this time in order to comply with what the master plan recommendation is. Based upon our review of the proposal, at this time it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend to the Township Board of Trustees to rezone the subject site from M1 to M2 designation, subject to meeting of the 12 standards that are listed in the McKenna review letter dated, if I can find the first page, August 5th of 2024. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Director Power, anything else from the staff?
Nope, there are no further comments from staff. This is simply or strictly a planning review for rezoning.
Okay, then from the applicant, do we have a presentation for?
Excuse me, Ryan Hartzuff with MG2 on behalf of Costco. With me, I have Larry Jerzyk from Costco Real Estate. As the township staff have noted, the goal of this is to rezone the property that Costco owns to match their current use and property to allow for future expansion and goals related around truck traffic and alleviating a lot of the truck traffic that is going on at the building. So happy to answer any questions or address any comments.
Okay, commissioners?
Through the chair, I do have a question for the applicant. With an expansion, would you expect there to be more trucking, or is it just absorbing some of the volume that's happening now?
At this time, it would be absorbing the volume that they currently deal with. In addition to that, there's a large portion of the site that they're planning to accommodate triple their bullpen parking, which is their driver waiting area, so that they're tripling the amount of space for trucks to get off the road, out of Walmart parking lots, all of that stuff, so that they can keep them on site and process them within their property.
And I also have a question for planner Vidya. So currently to the west, the residential homes,
Yes,
that property is zoned
M1.
M1. So if we take it to M2 or whatever it might be and is industrial, so the requirements for landscape, the photometric requirements, as well as any noise requirements, is that requirement between an M2 and M1 use, or an M2 and the residential?
So there are different categories in the zoning ordinance. One would require, one aspect is landscaping between an M2 zoning and an M1 zoning.
Right.
Another will be between an industrial use and a residentially zoned or used parcel.
That's the question, okay.
And we have made the applicant aware at such time when they apply for site plan approval, they will be expected to, if necessary, add as much landscaping as is required in order to protect those existing homes on Beck Road.
Right, so that should
Yes.
answer some of the residents' concerns.
Commissioner Jar?
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask staff or consultants, are the screening requirements between residential and M2 different than the screening requirements between residential and M1? Or are the screening requirements basically the same between the two zone types? That's specific to our zoning ordinance, I know, and I just don't know the
Yeah.
answer.
Fair certainty that they're the same, but I can verify here in this meeting before. we
Certainly,
think about it,
Mr. Chairman,
unless
certainly they aren't,
Ms. Christian-
they aren't less,
Right.
less restrictive. There won't be less screening by doing
Right.
this rezoning.
But I think if it's not equal, it would be more, it seems to me.
That answered my question, thank you.
Oh, okay. Do you know when you're going to look at the addition coming in or coming back before us as far as for the addition is concerned?
I believe we plan to submit that application within the next 2 weeks, provided that this rezoning moves forward.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, just one other question for staff. The parcel ID that's under discussion for rezoning, that is a separate parcel ID from the existing Costco
Yes.
development? And would it be safe to assume that if Costco were to redevelop or their building onto this parcel, the two parcels would be combined?
Yes, at such time when they come for site plan approval to build anything on this, the two parcels will have to be combined because any addition will end up straddling the two parcel line, which we typically do not like. So the planning commission would be making that a condition of approval, that the parcels will have to be combined into one tax parcel ID.
And, Mr. Chair, I'd also ask if Costco were to sell the property, the zoning would, if granted or recommended tonight to M2, that would stay with the property after a sale, correct?
Yes.
And the property in question is what we call landlocked right now, right? No road access?
No, there is no road access to it.
Okay, I didn't have any comment on that, I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Through the chair. I'm
Right,
glad the
Howard.
question was raised by, I believe, Commissioner Grant. When you have a developing M2 zoning district per section 10.103E of our zoning ordinance, there's a B-type greenbelt requirement adjacent to M1 zoning, as opposed to an A-type that would be required adjacent to M2. So there's still a 20-foot wide type B greenbelt requirement adjacent to the M1 zoned properties to the west.
And if it's a residential use, it has to be to residential use rather than M1. That's what I just heard.
We're going to have to look at that more closely. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if there's any subtext in this section of the zoning code that addresses residential use as opposed to industrial use, but we'll definitely investigate that.
Besides this section, there might be other sections in the ordinance that specifically address residential use versus just residential zoning.
Right.
So we definitely will be looking at that when a plan comes back.
Should the development move forward?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions? Comments? Do we have anything further from the public? Have we answered your questions?
My first question, I don't know if I have to identify myself again, but it's Maureen Little. I'm the daughter of the property owner of 6233 Beck Road. My first question is, why are they calling this Beck Road if they have no access to Beck Road?
Through the chair, I could try to answer that. The actual request is just for the parcel, specifically the parcel. And the
What-
Beck Road identifier was just put on there based on it being closer to Beck Road than Belleville Road. That was
But
just a
why wouldn't
labeling
it
error.
be considered Belleville Road since that's where they currently are coming in and out of?
It will have frontage on Belleville Road, and it will maintain a Belleville Road address.
So
That's
is there
correct.
plans to open up to Beck Road or Michigan Avenue?
There are no plans to open up to Beck Road at this time. Is that correct? 'Cause I don't believe the property owner has any property on Beck Road.
Okay. I just want to go back to part of the reasoning about the noise and the lights that we're concerned about. Currently, there's property that's across on the west side of Beck Road, and there's a plant that runs along the creek that has lights in there, and they do bother us. One particular light is so bright that it actually hurts your eyes when you walk out into the driveway. So we have concerns about the lights connected with that part. The noise part, I can go in my backyard, or her backyard, I should say, and I've heard this beep, beep, beeping from the trucks. Don't know exactly where it's coming from because of the piece that comes up from Michigan Avenue and because of this coming back. So it's irritating, to say the least. I can hear it from the other side of the Beck Road also. But I just want you to be aware that we hear this and it's almost like you feel like you can't do anything about it. But I thought this was a time that I could bring forth and talk to you about it. I have heard also possibility of somebody coming to the back of Costco's property and blasting a radio of some sort, maybe from a car, maybe from a truck, I'm not sure. But, you know, the access that they have, I know it's guarded off of Belleville Road, but I would just be concerned about something of that sort as well. The other thing I have concern about is I have been aware of somebody living across on Van Born Road, across from a truck plant, and you hear the engines roaring, you know, as they turn their engines on and they sit there for a while. That again would be a noise that would be annoying from our aspect of it. So I just wanted to bring those forth to you. And I'm assuming that in the future if they develop something there, that you'll be letting us know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments? Anybody commenting on Zoom? Director Power.
Still no comments on Zoom, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'll build off of something I think Ms. Christian said earlier as well, which is that if there is a proposed expansion, it will be likely considered a truck terminal, which is going to require special land use review by the Planning Commission, which would invoke another public hearing, where that would likely be what would happen, so there would likely be another notice.
And under a special land use umbrella, the Planning Commission can ask for additional green belts and more robust landscaping. It is well within the purview of a special land use requirement. Couple of things Ms. Little mentioned, those sound like code enforcement issues, so that is something I will work with Director Power into looking into, especially the west side of Beck and south side of Van Born. Those are likely code enforcement violations of some sort, so we will look into it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, I guess at this time we can entertain motion concerning this request.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to entertain the motion if none of the other commissioners are ready to go.
But you do it so well.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Planning Commission recommends approval to the Township Board of Trustees for the requested amendment to the zoning ordinance made by the applicant, Ryan Hartstuff of MG2 on behalf of owner Costco Wholesale, Inc., to rezone the property located at parcel ID V125-83-014-99-0004-704 from M1 Light Industrial District to M2 General Industrial District, based on the analysis detailed in the letter from staff dated August 20th, 2024, and the McKenna letter dated August 5th, 2024.
Do we have a support?
Support.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Grant, to change the zoning from M1 to M2. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
I think the motion should include that the parcels have to be combined, because that is not listed in her requirement.
Now, that's, Mr. Chair, we should
Commissioner
discuss
Jarrett.
the motion. I don't
Yes.
know if that wasn't really put forth as a condition for the rezoning. That would make this a conditional rezoning request, right?
Yeah, the rezoning is not going to alter the setup of the lots. They're not going to be able to sell the lots separately or anything. They're merely changing it on paper, but that will definitely be a condition added when they have their site
When
plan.
when they bring some in, okay.
They
Okay.
actually, I believe, have their application ready. We just told them it would be presumptuous to submit it before a rezoning is considered. So I'm thinking if the Planning Commission sends it tonight to the board and the board acts on it, they have their submission package ready, and that will be one of the first conditions placed on it.
I withdraw my comment.
Okay.
I'd like to continue on that comment, though, for just a moment, if I could, discussion of the
Sure.
motion, because if we do recommend rezoning and the Township Board rezones it, that follows the parcel, whether Costco develops it or not. I think what the commissioner was alluding to was literally doing a conditional rezoning request. You only get to rezone it to M2 if you combine the parcel. I'm okay with the motion as it stands. I just want to make sure I understood what the commissioner was asking. Since she is the board representative and will be, and we'll be discussing this item in front of the Township Board of Trustees. You're good?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no other discussion.
Anybody else? Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, I do apologize because I want to
Director
clarify
Power.
something before, while we're having this discussion. I'm not sure when's a better time than during the discussion of the motion, even though I don't think it really affects the motion. I had the zoning ordinance open and available. From memory, I may have misremembered truck terminals, if that is the use that's proposed or whatever the use is. This may be a permitted use under the M2 zoning district that would not technically require a public hearing or special land use. So I do want to clarify that. However, I think as Ms. Christian said, we'll be looking more closely at the landscaping requirements in relation to residential uses. And if any of the residents who live on Beck Road want more information about how to find out the current plans for that project, regardless of if there's a formal public hearing, please feel free to come grab my card on the way out, and I'll get you the right contact people for that.
Yes.
Most likely, if it's use like Costco currently has, under M2 zoning, it is a permitted use by right, and there would not be a required public notice. It will be in a public meeting, however, and you could attend the public meeting. Only in a posted agenda in advance of the meeting, not in a postcard or a newspaper notice.
Bottom line is, she wants to know what they're doing and what's happening. And we've been there for 70 years, so it's important to her.
Mhm. What I might suggest is just having regular contacts for communicating if there's any questions about the plans.
Ms.
that are
Little,
gonna be
if you would
presented.
please leave your email address or your phone number, we'll make sure to give you a call or send you an email letting you know well ahead of time that there is a meeting.
We'll do what we can for you. Commissioner Jar.
Mr. Chairman, given that the property is also adjacent to this one, wouldn't they also fall within a 300-foot notification radius for things like a parcel combination or
No.
that, or no?
Lot combinations do not require.
Don't
public
require
notice.
that 300-foot notification, okay. I leave the information, definitely.
And I can give you cards as well.
Mr. Chairman, I have no other discussion.
Any other comments, commissioners?
Through the chair, seeing as how we're having a big discussion regarding this project, I want to follow up regarding a comment I had and request regarding how our ordinance, police department know in regards to trucks are going down Belleville Road, because that's in line too with the noise, the lights, the beeping, the loud music. Remember my comment, my question about that? Were you able to get us some answers?
We began the process. Our recording secretary wears many hats, and one of her hats is that she works in our public safety department. So Tina and I were discussing today some of the challenges with filtering a search for that type of violation. If I'm remembering correctly, and Tina, feel free to speak to it, it's based on ticketing, which there isn't necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison with the trucks coming from the Costco site that are in violation of road routing issues. So we'll have to dig a little deeper. Tina, if you'd like to speak to that more, feel free.
Yeah, because the search parameters are kind of constricted as far as to how we can search. So it ends up pulling up all areas, not just that area. And if I just do Belleville Road, it won't necessarily show all of the truck pattern traffic that's on Belleville Road from Costco, because it doesn't identify the Costco truck per se. So it's hard to narrow that search down.
May I address the question?
Yes, please.
Costco has engaged Kittleson Engineering as a traffic study to identify the patterns that trucks from the site are taking, identify how many are violating the agreed upon routes, and that will be a report that will be submitted with our application.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments?
All right, that covers the trucks. I want to know about the ordinances regarding what the residents have to do in regards to noise. I know that we're going to request that the lights be facing downward, so it should not provide anything that would come into your homes at night. But what about the beeping and the loud noises? They call the police department, request, who do they contact?
There are a couple of avenues that can be taken with land uses on an ongoing basis. Their generation of noise in relation to their surrounding properties is evaluated through the zoning ordinance. There are maximum allowable limits of decibels. This came up with as a concern with another project that's on the agenda tonight. There are maximum levels of decibels that can be received at the adjoining property from a given land use on another property. However, our police department also has a police power general ordinance to address excessively loud music and some other things that are more on an individual basis, complaints of that nature. I'm not sure exactly how they measure the sound decibels for those kinds of instances, but I know there is an ordinance that addresses noise emanated from vehicles too. And we can find out additional information about that as well.
So if I may add, Mr. Chair, anytime a site plan is approved by the Planning Commission or by the township, it is automatically required to comply with the performance standards in our zoning ordinance, which is for noise, smoke, odor, all of those. Anytime any one of those are violated, it is a nuisance. It's called as a public nuisance, and a public nuisance comes under the township's police powers, and it becomes a code enforcement. So you would either report it to the police or you would file a code enforcement complaint. And the township's code enforcement officers would be the one who would investigate it and issue a ticket or a citation to bring the site into compliance.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I believe my motion is still on the table.
Yes. Okay. We have, yes.
She's asking about the traffic for the Costco trucks. If you go to the corner of that, Michigan Avenue and Belleville Road, you can watch the traffic. I drive in that area quite a bit, and I frequent the Tim Hortons there, and I see it, and I'm also an active person on Belleville Road, which needs work done on it, especially at Van Born and Belleville Road. It's almost an accident waiting to happen right there. But if you were just to stand there and watch, you can see it. There's also the traffic that's right across from them that comes in from Ford Motor Company parking their vehicles. So there's like Broncos going up and down through there. There's a lot of traffic.
Okay. At this time, we have a motion and a support. Can we have a roll call vote on motion, please?
Peter Creel?
Yes.
Bernie Grant?
Yes.
Sherry Budd?
Yes.
Medina Atchison?
Yes.
Jeff Jar?
Yes.
Brian Cullen?
Yes. So we have the zoning to send to the Township Board for changing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item number 2. Woodland Meadows RNG Expansion Project, Final Site Plan. A request by Kyle Robbins of Amoresco on behalf of Waste Management of Michigan, Incorporated, to construct a methane gas recovery plant. The applicant seeks to construct a facility, will receive landfill gas from the landfill, which will be processed into high BTU renewable natural gas and delivered to the Detroit Edison Gas remote metering station for injection into the natural gas pipeline. The facility and accessory site improvements will include a 12,652 square foot compressor building, a 2,754 square foot electrical building, compressors, tanks, process vessels, flares, process coolers, and wastewater treatment. The site is a 5.41 acre lease parcel on the west side of Hannon Road, north of Ecorse Road. The parcel includes portions of parcels with ID 83-003-990003-702, which is identified as 39670 Ecorse Road, and 83-004-990012-000-6724 Hannon Road. The site is zoned C1, General Business District. We have first a presentation by the township staff. Director Power.
Sure. We went over in pretty significant detail when this came before you as a preliminary site plan in February, some of the background behind this plant, some of the history that led to this being proposed at this location on Hannon Road, south of Van Born Road, where there's an expansion currently occurring with the Woodland Meadows landfill. So I won't go into more of that history unless the Planning Commission requests that, but I will just try to follow along with our planners and engineers' comments, and then I have some updates on the fire marshal and deputy fire chief's comments that I provided some copies of some additional reports from him that also coincide with an additional letter regarding the building construction that were provided by the applicant. So that's just some additional information I'll tag along on with the fire marshal's reporting at the end. And a question was brought up before the meeting regarding the architectural elevations. I'll be sure to show those on the screen as well, because in hard copy at least, those don't appear to be something that we got over to the planning commissioners. So I'll be sure to show some of that on the screen, either during Ms. Krishnen's presentation or after. So with that, I will defer to Vidya Krishnan to go over the planning findings on the final site plan request.
Thank you, Director Power. Good evening, members of the commission. As was summarized, the request before you tonight is for final site plan approval for Amoresco Woodland Meadows for the RNG gas facility expansion. The site has an area of 5.41 acres and is zoned C1, which is general business. Now, solid waste facilities such as landfills and associated improvements are typically not permitted in a C1 general business district, but the subject was a former golf course, which was converted to a landfill and is governed by a host community agreement that was executed with Van Buren Township in 1990 and subsequently amended to allow for additional changes. So the landfill's operation is governed by the state's Waste Management Act, but the site is still required to comply with our local zoning ordinance regulations. So the applicant appeared before you and was granted preliminary site plan approval at your meeting held on February 24th of 2024. At the time, you granted preliminary approval subject to a series of conditions, which I shall summarize. The first one was consistent layout on data on all sheets. There was slight discrepancy between two sheets. The applicant has since corrected that. We had asked for township engineer and fire marshal approval of the paved access drive and the partial gravel drive that circulates around the site. So I will defer to the fire marshal's report and to Fishbeck on noting compliance with that standard. We had asked for clarification regarding the barrier-free access ramp connection from the barrier-free access parking space to the building, compressor building itself. Now, there are very few parking spaces on here, but it's important that the handicap accessible space have a ramp. The revised plan does show an ADA compliant slope to the barrier-free access parking space. The next condition was township engineer review and approval, which I'll defer to Fishbeck. One request from the applicant was an exemption for the greenbelt requirement on the west side of the property, which would be between the applicant's lease area and the actual landfill. The Planning Commission did grant the deviation because it made no sense to require a bunch of trees between the landfill and the gas plant. The viability of trees was also in question. Wayne County approval of the detention basin landscaping. Now, this condition can be met. The applicant did provide copy of a soil erosion sedimentation control permit from the county. They also provided us with a list of comments from the county. They are mostly engineering comments, so I would defer to Fishbeck on whether they, at this time, have met what is required. The next requirement was compliance with the lighting requirements. One of the questions was whether the exterior light being provided to the site meets the ordinance standards, because one of the fixtures was an adjustable tilt head. The Planning Commission had concern that that can possibly, if the head is not adjusted properly, you're going to be shining out into the right-of-way or into the neighbors across the street. That pole was, the adjustable tilt lighting was to be removed. All fixtures were to be downward directed and shielded, and pole-mounted lights were limited to a maximum height of 25 feet. Now the condition has been met. The illumination levels on the new photometric plan show that they taper off to 0 at the property line. All fixtures are mounted at 25 feet from finished floor elevations, and the top of the fixture will not exceed the 25 feet limit. There were two fixtures which had a dropped lens. It's basically, the bulb is there, but the lens hangs below it. We typically do not consider those shielded fixtures. We had asked for dropped lens to be replaced with flat lens fixtures so that at no point of time will the actual bulb be seen, and that has been done. There was a slight notation error of a prefabricated metal building that was removed from the plans. The Planning Commission reviewed extensively the color of the gate of Hannon Road, making sure that it wasn't bright white that would call attention to the facility. Rather, it was a muted earth tone that would blend in with the new buildings in the back. And the applicant has submitted a colored rendering. The applicant has submitted little color swatch samples that show the actual coloring, because when it gets printed in a printer, it's not always a true accurate. But we believe, based upon the color sample shots that are included in our packet, that the color that the gate will actually blend in with the environment it is around. One of the important things the Planning Commission had asked for is information from the cell tower company regarding the fall pattern to ensure safety in the event the cell tower collapse. The applicant did submit a letter from the tower company which states that a complete tower collapse can occur only if catastrophic weather events occur, which are highly unlikely in this area. The plan does include a fall radius map, which does show, and in the unlikely event the tower does collapse, it would hit the southeast corner of the compressor building, the condensate treatment building, and some of the outdoor mechanical equipment. Now, the applicant's response notes that in the event of a fall, it would not fall on any equipment that contains any of the combustible gases. Now, we did recommend, even though this is highly unlikely, even if there is a slight possibility of it, we did want the fire marshal to be involved and looped in so that they have an emergency management plan should such a thing ever happen. We had asked the applicant to show cross-section of the entire street going all the way across Hannon Road to the mobile home park so that the Planning Commission could see the effectiveness of the berm, the retaining wall, and the landscaping that would be put in front of the site. And the applicant has submitted those line of sight diagrams. At this time, we believe all of the planning concerns noted on the preliminary site plan approval have been met. The engineering concerns, of course, I defer to Fishbeck to go over the engineering details and the fire marshal. But with regard to the planning issues, I recommend that the Planning Commission grant final site plan approval for the Woodland Meadows RNG gas plant expansion project to be located at 39670 Ecos Road, subject to fire marshal and township engineers' approval of utilities and circulation and development of an emergency response plan in the unlikely event of a tower failure. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lepick?
Thank you. At the request of the township, Fishbeck reviewed the final site plans dated June 21st, 2024 for the proposed Woodland Meadows Renewable Natural Gas Facility located at 6780 Hannon Road in Van Buren Township. Our final engineering review comments included a few minor utility material comments. Our most significant comment came in the stormwater management, specifically Wayne County review. There is some more stormwater management work happening just south to the site by the waste management property that the landfill that surrounds us. There is the work that they're doing is putting in the new detention pond, and the outlet for that pond currently goes through the proposed site. The applicant did provide a description of what's happening with this area, and which I can read now. So a separate stormwater management system for the waste management landfill site is currently approved, permit C53846 by the county. This has not yet been constructed. Waste Management has submitted an addendum to the previously approved permit, which includes rerouting the drainage ditch around the new Amoresco site. The rerouted ditch includes a 42-foot long, 10-foot by 30-inch corrugated metal box culvert under the existing driveway for the Amoresco site. The proposed Amoresco stormwater detention basin outlet will discharge into the proposed waste management ditch downstream of the culvert. The construction of Waste Management's ditch will begin following approval from Wayne County. We've been going through this comment during the design process. And in our letter, we say, as stated in previous review letters, the ultimate outlet of the Amoresco detention basin is in the proposed waste management ditch and therefore is contingent on the ditch approval and construction. So in our letter, we just wanted to say the applicant will not receive pre-construction acceptance until all county approvals and permits for waste management work and the Amoresco work are submitted to the township for record. So that's pre-construction review, not final site plan approval, which I can make my recommendation later. But basically, Waste Management needs to reroute a stormwater ditch that currently goes through the site right now, which they're trying to get approved from the county. And then Amoresco is proposing further modifications to that, which includes the precast box culvert that goes under their driveway and the berms that are required. So if any of that doesn't get through Wayne County approval, I would like to note that that may interfere with the culvert and then the berms on top of the culvert, proposed culvert. So based on our engineering review, the engineering feasibility is there. We will, Fitchburg recommends that the Planning Commission grant the Woodland Meadows RNG expansion project site plans final site plan approval based on the engineering review. However, we note that if anything has to change due to Wayne County review, the township has a right to request another review and I believe potentially come back to final site plan approval if anything major changes. So that our letter was pretty minor. That's the end of it. So I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Power.
I will just provide a couple of updates on the fire marshal's comments with a new letter being received today. First of all, I want to note there was some exchange regarding the size of the proposed compressor building, which is the large rectangle that you see in the center of the site here, a little over 12,000 square feet, which is a vital part of the process of the natural gas conversion. Based on the use group and construction type of the building, there's some communication regarding how large that building was allowed to be under the current building codes, based on a calculation that's provided for the level of fire protection in the building and the hazard group that's in the building. There are some limits on the size of those buildings. After a lot of coordination between our reviewers, our fire department and building department reviewers, as well as the applicant, a proposal was put forth that would change the construction type of this compressor building to add fire rating and to increase the essentially the fire protection construction within the building to make the construction type from 2B to 1B. And based on this altered one of the main comments in the letter from the fire marshal, as well as some of the other comments have been addressed as well. So the letter that you received today is the one that I will refer to, which was distributed just before the meeting. There's first, with respect to water supply, putting a pin in this building size comment for a little bit. The first comment here with regard to water supply is that a flow test was performed on October 4th, 2023, and the hydrant that was used flowed 1,167 gallons per minute. The IFC requires a flow of 2,500 gallons per minute. Reduction of 75% for the fire suppression system reduces that required flow to 1,000 gallons per minute. This eliminates the need for a second fire hydrant. There was a code assessment that was provided to provide some data for this. The fire marshal also notes that a fire pump and storage tank will not be required on site. Per the submitted plans regarding fire department access, the gate that's provided will be manually operated. Operations notes in terms of maintenance of the access drive around the building have been included on sheet 17 of the submitted civil plan set, which includes maintenance details of the ring road. And the emergency vehicle access plan showing vehicle movement around the entire site was required to show dimensions of the Buren Township Fire Department ladder truck, and the July 16th submittal shows that this is compliant. Regarding general comments, this goes to what I was speaking to earlier. In order to comply with the Michigan Building Code restrictions on an H2 building, the applicant in a letter dated August 21st has agreed to change the type of construction from 2B to 1B. And this change in type of construction will allow the building to be 12,740 square feet, subject to approval by our building plan reviewer during the building permit plan review process. With respect to the hazardous materials inventory, this was provided. It's one of the submittals you received electronically. Per the letter dated September 28th of '23, a spill containment and control plan and hazardous materials inventory statement will be submitted as part of the building permit process. And then the 8th note here is regarding the comment that came up during preliminary site plan that the planning consultant mentioned with respect to in the event of a catastrophic failure of the cell tower, the compressor building, condensate treatment building, and outdoor mechanical equipment could potentially be in the collapse zone radius. And for this reason, an emergency response plan will need to be provided and approved by the agency holding jurisdiction. With all these comments in mind, the site plan is approved subject to the above conditions being addressed prior to construction or prior to a building permit being issued. I would like to turn your attention now to just supplement some of the earlier comments. I apologize, these images were not up on the screen earlier. You looked at a similar version of many of these during preliminary site plan review. In terms of these plan view drawings, we have the line of sight drawings that our planning consultant was mentioning. We have some construction details regarding the proposed wall. The rendering showing the view of the proposed wall from across the road with what look like mature or near mature growth levels of the proposed trees on the berm. And I did put this together. There's a set of elevation drawings that's very similar to the elevation drawings that were provided with the preliminary site plan approval. Again, these were not provided in hard copy for you this evening, so I wanted to show them to you more up close. We have on the next screen here the color samples that were provided, and on the most recent elevation drawings dated May 2024, these are the split CMU material of split face CMU material of the building is what's being shown throughout the compressor building. There are bands of different coloring. Mr. Robbins, maybe you can speak to which was which in terms of what will be light colored and what will be dark colored, but there are two different colors that will be presented on the public facing facade of the building on those band areas. And that concludes the supplemental slides from the comments from our planner, engineer, and fire marshal. So I'm happy to take any other questions.
Okay, thank you. The applicant, do you have anything for us?
So I just wanted to provide a clarification about the gate rendering. The applicant intentionally made the gate look lighter on it because if they made the true color, the gate is not even visible. It sort of blends in with the background. So just to show the gate, it's shown in slightly lighter color on this rendering.
Thank you.
Me or you?
I can't.
I believe I have disconnected, so.
Try that again. There we go. Hi, good evening. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me tonight, and thanks for inviting me here, and thanks for your time over the last several months as we work through this process. I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Kyle Robbins with Ameresco. I'm the project manager for this facility. And with me tonight, I have Jeff Stander, the Vice President of Sustainable Energy Development. I just want to give a little background to Ameresco. We're a renewable energy company, and we have over the last 22 years, we've been working on these types of projects throughout the country. We have 39 in operation that are biogas projects and produce energy that is a renewable energy form. And this particular is for landfill gas to RNG. This project's located, as you all may know, up on the northeast corner of the town along Handon Road at the Woodland Meadows landfill. And this is our site plan that I'll just touch on that you've probably looked at, but just kind of give a little bit of a context to some of the equipment on site. It's a gas processing facility that would take landfill gas and clean it up through media in vessels through pressure and temperature, and then put it into a natural gas pipeline down the street at the DTE meter station. And I think I'll just kind of field questions from there. So thank you guys, and let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer.
Okay, commissioners, questions, comments?
Actually, through the chair, I do have a question.
Commissioner Gregg.
Maybe more so procedural than anything, but this is a Fishbeck question. You mentioned something about, and I don't recall if it's noted in here, that if there's substantial changes, that they need to come back to final site plan. So is that something that's already covered in, I mean, because how do you know what substantial is, and who's going to make that decision?
I think Mike is mentioning from an engineering aspect, but if anything changes from a planning aspect, the berm design or the way the berm is structured, because the berm is such an integral part of screening on the site, the planning director can bring it back to you.
I guess the question is, why would you say that? Because if it's implied, because that's our process, why would you? Is there something that you have a concern about that?
And that's what if the county has a problem with the drain that hasn't been constructed yet, that's going to be constructed after this, I mean, is that done by approval of occupancy? Because it's beyond this commission, I would assume, because it's already passed final site approval. Is my understanding.
Yes, through the chair, I can try to speak to that. The steps following a final site plan review like this there's two different paths of local review process. One is the building permit. One is what's called pre-construction. And as a part of pre-construction, before we give kind of a final administrative green light to start moving earth around and start building the utilities on the site, we need a issued for construction plan set. And what needs to be reflected in that IFC plan set is the county's approved version of all drain, stormwater, right-of-way design items. And so if what the county requires alters anything in those regards that ends up changing anything, I think as Mr. Lepick was saying, on the surface of the site in terms of the berm or the driveway or the culvert size that may affect the layout of the site, then it would come back to the planning commission, and staff is there to flag that.
The reason I asked that is because that sounds like it's a standard procedure. I mean, and that's why I asked if there was something outside of that you had concern about that I'm not aware of. And I do have a second question, and this is another procedural one. I know that the elevations are not in the packet. So if we give final site plan tonight, we don't have elevations to put our eyes on other than what was previously submitted. How do we really know what we're approving?
I believe the elevations that were, so after preliminary site plan review, there have been a couple of rounds of review on the set of plans collectively that was presented after preliminary site plan review. I believe we looked at the May elevation drawings, but those just were not copied into the packet with the July drawings that we're now reviewing tonight. So staff has looked at them, and maybe Vidya, you can speak to that as well, but they're just, they've addressed the concerns from preliminary site plan review, but they're just not copied into this packet tonight.
I understand that. But
When the planning commission approved the preliminary site plan, you actually approved the building elevation. You had lots of corrections to be made, but not to the elevations. Ideally, those set of elevations that you approved preliminary should have been part of the package, but it looks like for some reason it wasn't there. So what we will do is, after the Planning Commission's approval, we will make sure the applicant submits a full approved set, which will include those elevation sheets from your preliminary approval as part of that single packet. We will make sure the dates match what you approved on the preliminary site plan set. We generally track the dates of plans, so.
And so there were no elevation changes since the preliminary? None whatsoever? Okay. No.
And if they want to make, they cannot make it anymore. I mean, it is understood if that's the drawing that was approved and they did not present any changes at this time, what you approved will stand.
Because I believe the only change that would have been part of that was the differentiation of two bands of color that have been now provided. And I think those were part of the,
Those were actually there in the preliminary. We had discussed it before, and that's, the building is that smooth face block, and the banding is that darker brown banding. The Planning Commission had looked at that at preliminary.
But procedurally, it should be in there.
Yes, procedurally.
Because we don't want to make it a habit for applicants.
Absolutely.
I don't have any issue with the elevations, I'm just saying.
We
You know,
shall
I'm
make
very
sure.
sensitive to the elevation issue, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
That they build what they say they're going to build and something doesn't change and we didn't get to see it and do us, hey, we saw that final drawing.
You're absolutely correct. We will make sure next time that a
Okay.
packet that comes before you for final does have the elevations also in it. I didn't realize it wasn't
Okay.
part of your packet.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
Commissioner
make-
Jar.
If I understand the commissioner correctly, the elevations that we approved in the preliminary site plan don't appear in this final site plan. We want to make sure that they're reviewed by staff and included in the pre-construction plans. Where do we want those included?
Right after final site plan approval, we will expect Mr. Robbins to actually submit a set that actually has those sheets inserted in it well before pre-construction also takes place.
I think these were submitted as part of the May submittal that you guys reviewed, but just this last time they weren't resubmitted.
Yeah,
Is that
they-
right? So
yeah, they
you already
should have
have
been
them, right? Or do
Yes.
we just, why do you need me to submit those same exact drawings? Is that the idea?
You would submit it for the file, so you would submit it to Director Power. You would submit at least 2 sets for the file that actually includes every single sheet in it.
Okay, printed out like the other ones. Okay, so that's a request on my part to get that to you?
And so that set gets stamped somehow?
there is a stamped set of elevations that will be part of the building permit as well. And
Right.
we'll, at a minimum, look at it at the time of a building permit application being made, but ideally as part of a IFC set as well. And they should be sealed, yes.
No, I'm not just talking sealed. I was just talking about, is there a township stamp that actually records that set that's issued
Yes,
on the surface of it somehow and in writing? Okay.
yes, yep.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask staff, what's the ISC set?
Oh, issued for construction.
Thank you. I think I got that.
Yeah, I think so.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? None? Director Power, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Just one attendee on Zoom. I don't see any hands raised or anything in the chat.
Okay, I don't see anybody in the audience with comments. Okay, then I would entertain a motion concerning this item.
Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to make the motion at this time. I'd move to grant the applicant Kyle Robbins of Amoresco on behalf of Waste Management Incorporated the final site plan approval to construct a methane gas recovery plant at the site located as described in the agenda item. Based on the analysis and subject to the conditions detailed in the letter of staff dated August 20th, 2024, the McKenna letter dated July 29th, 2024, the Fishback letter dated August 1st, 2024, and the Van Buren Fire Report letter dated August 28th, 2024. Noting the feedback and concerns from Civil Engineer Lepic regarding procedural matters around the storm and drainage approval, with the additional condition of requiring an emergency response plan for the cell tower failure as required by the fire marshal, and the condition that the approved elevations are to be reviewed by staff for inclusion before pre-construction and to be included in the ISC stat.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Jar, supported by Commissioner Grant. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Medina Atchison? Peter Creel? Bernie Grant?
Yes.
Sherry Budd? Jeff Jar?
Yes.
Brian Cullen?
Yes. You have your final site plan approval.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yep.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving ahead. Item number 3. Case number 21-040, DTE Morton Substation, minor site plan amendment. Staff seeks approval for a minor modification of the approved landscaping plan for the DTE Morton Substation project on behalf of DTE Electric. The applicant gained final site plan approval for construction of 120 13.2 kilovolt, 80 megavolt, 9 megavolt lamp. Yeah,
I don't know.
9-circuit substation and related site improvements at the regular planning commission meeting of February 8th, 2023. The location is at 42061 Ecorse Road, tax parcel 830419900040001 on the south side of Ecorse Road between Haggerty Road and Kirkridge Park Drive. We have a presentation by the township staff. Director Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The request presented before you tonight is fairly minor. This is the result of trying to do some final planning inspections in the field where the DTE Morton substation was recently built on Ecorse Road, on the south side of Ecorse Road, west of Haggerty Road. The substation has been under construction since the early part of 2023, and in the recent site visit that I completed, I was looking for completion of landscaping as well as trying to just verify the final count of removed trees, which were part of the substation request so that we could do some final invoicing for that. As part of, in part of my observations in the field, what I had noticed was that it appeared there was some missing landscaping relative to what was required on the east end of the site. You can see kind of what happens on the east end of the site where it abuts the property to the east. There's an existing berm that's part of the Ashley Crossroads South Distribution Center site. And there's a pretty thick mound of pretty dense vegetation that goes almost right up to the fence line where the substation is proposed. And realizing that, looking at the approved plans, you can see that there is some landscaping that's required on the approved plans that is just on that property line right by where that barn would be located. But then looking at the plans more closely, it was realized that some of this may actually be off-site in the property to the east. So recognizing that there appeared to be some landscaping deficiencies and that these were actually proposed on the adjacent berm and not on the site itself, where there may not be a lot of aesthetic value to having those plantings be there, my recommendation would be for the Planning Commission to consider a modification to the approved landscaping plan that would allow any plantings that were required in that area to be moved up front so that there can be some more significant screening from Ecorse Road that would provide a more durable screening from the public view of the site. As a slight update to this, which this would be kind of a conceptual view of where those plants would move to, just to fill in the gaps between some of the other trees in the front of the site. The DTE team, after that site visit, initially they concurred that it looked like there was some landscaping missing, but they think they may have planted some of it. So my request would be, some of it may already be dead, and so my request would be to allow flexibility for staff in the future to allow, if there are replacements that are necessary, or if there are deficiencies, that some of those plants can be moved up front. Just a kind of a minor change to allow up to, I think I counted a combination of, there's a number, 8 evergreen trees and 22 shrubs, that the maximum of that number of each type of plant to be moved to the front from the side of the site. So that is my request on behalf of DTE, if necessary, if we could move those plants from the eastern greenbelt where there really is no space to the front of the site.
Commissioners, comments?
You're saying this is on the east side, it's along Belleville Road?
Haggerty Road,
Haggerty Road.
sorry, it's between Haggerty and Morton Taylor Road.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's on the east side.
Yes.
So the screening is on a berm that's off-site?
It was actually proposed on the berm off-site.
So
And
so my question leads to, if it's a required screening on property, what would it have done to the setback required for the project?
There's really, the green belt that's in place is really created by the adjacent site in this case, and we could look back through some of the comments around the site plan review. There may have been a modification that was discussed, but I don't have good notes on that
You know where I'm
currently.
going with that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if it was a required screening, whether it's landscape or wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the case. You know, that you would have had to accommodate it within the property lines, which means whatever comes up to that point needs to get pushed back,
We
or a wall.
may have interpreted, based on the drawing that was submitted on the landscaping plan, that the property line was actually not where it's actually located. It is kind of a strange situation where it appears that that was reviewed as part of the eastern green belt inside of the site, but the actual boundary line of the site was perhaps incorrectly drawn. So I know this is, Ms. Christian may have some comments on this. I know we didn't really
It's a little
go to this.
while ago, but I do remember there being significant discussion about the fencing going around the property and the effectiveness of the screening, especially because they had the huge hedge frame or whatever they put main in the site. They initially were proposing only a chain link fence, and the planning commission said, we don't want to see that. That is why a second layer of fence was that vinyl fence that came along Ecorse Road. That fence was made a secondary fence to screen it. And I think some modifications were made in order to, because the fence was believed to be more effective in securing the site, and based upon the existing landscaping already being on the site next to it, we made some adjustment to it. I don't remember exactly what, but I can always find the notes from that.
So then you're saying the fence is a screen?
Or the planning commission does have the ability to modify.
I'm just wondering, I just talking about, and probably some other procedural thing, right? Is, what, I mean, if it really wasn't built the way a zoning requires, unless you're saying there was some exceptions granted, then it wouldn't require a variance, would it?
No, the greenbelt modifications, any greenbelt modifications are within the planning commission's purview. The zoning ordinance does not send any modification of landscaping to the zoning board of appeals. It leaves it up to the planning commission to make a determination. And it's a while ago, but I do remember there was significant discussion, what purpose would landscaping in this area serve if you already have such a wide greenbelt from Ashley with so many plantings right next to it. So I don't know if in lieu of adding a green belt where it wouldn't serve a purpose, a secondary fence was required along Ecorse Road to screen that chain link fence. I'll try to pull up. I know we did multiple letters on that and the discussion changed, so I should be able to find a trail of when we changed directions in that.
So for information though, what would be, because right now, sort of the physical separation is a fence, right? That's surrounding the equipment. So if, as far as setback is concerned, it would have to be on the setback line or it couldn't encroach into the setback, right?
If,
So if it was assumed that the property line was in the wrong spot, then maybe, you know where I'm going is, maybe the fence is in the wrong spot too.
what I would recommend, I can come back with some additional findings on this, because what may have happened is that there may have been a modification on the east lot line.
Okay.
And if there was not, then I would probably, all else being equal, still recommend a modification like that because of the existing berm and the little amount of added value there would be for the landscaping in that area.
Yeah, I know. I think I understand that, and I don't think that's an issue, but I'm just saying,
You want to make sure the fence was put on the
technically,
property
is
line
it
where it's.
correct? You know, the draw, you know, it's built by the way it should have been designed based on where the property line is and where the fence line should be.
I think we can take a look at the final approved site plan and field inspection. We can double verify that.
I just want to make sure we get it right for future applicants. That's all.
Yes.
Commissioners, anybody else?
I feel like I can trust staff to make sure that the modification meets the intent of the screening ordinance on this one.
That we get the correct number of trees and shrubs in place.
Yeah, as per the request in the letter.
Well, what I'm referring to is, there is, it seems like, unless somebody says otherwise, there's a real possibility that the fence has to get moved, or there needs to be an exception for it to be where it's at.
Commissioner Jarr.
I would ask Director Power to comment on that. Is that something you'd be checking if you're granted this request for the modification, you'll also check that the fence is in the right place?
Yes.
And I suppose, Mr. Chairman, I would ask staff if they found any other significant discrepancies, they'd bring them back before the Planning Commission rather than going ahead with a landscaping modification?
Yes.
If it's significant, you'll bring it back. If
Particularly verifying the location. There's, to your point, there's an exterior wall in some locations, and then a second layer of chain link fencing in some locations. If the wall was required on that eastern lot line in a location where it's not currently built yet, we'll verify that gets done and gets corrected. And I can say with a fair amount of certainty, but we'd also check this. The fencing that I observed on the east lot line in the field was on the property line. It's just some of the landscaping that they showed proposed appeared to actually be outside of that on the adjoining property. So I'll verify the lot lines and make sure everything's done according to the intent of the original
Okay,
approval.
but right now, we're just ruling on landscaping anyway, right? Is that what we're doing? Okay.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Then in that,
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at the Zoom screen and I see there are no participants.
check that. I don't see anyone else in the public to offer any comments. Then do we have an action on this plan?
Want to do it, Commissioner?
Why not? Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to grant the minor site plan amendment for a DTE Morton Substation that's located, I should get my glasses on, at 42061 Ecorse Road, tax parcel 83041990004001, moving, or that is modifying the site plan to move landscaping along the east side to what would be the north side of the property, as well as taking a look at any other items that might be on the site that are not consistent with the ordinances, and that may be brought before the Planning Commission if it's not sufficient.
Mr. Chair, I'd support
Okay.
that.
Okay, support. We have a motion by Commissioner Grant, support by Commissioner Jarr. Do we have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sherry Budd,
Yes.
Bernie Grant,
Yes.
Peter Creel,
Yes.
Medina Atchison. Jeff Jar. Brian Cullen.
Yes. So the motion carries.
Congratulations, staff.
Good job, staff. Way to be on top. Okay. At this point, do we have any announcements, discussion? Anything anybody wants to bring up?
There will be a meeting on September 11th.
Okay. Anybody else? Then I would entertain that dreaded motion that we all,
Through the chair, make a motion, we adjourn.
Support.
we have a motion by Commissioner Bud and support by Commissioner Jar for adjournment. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed?